This Thursday, a senior Hamas figure said that the Islamist group will lay down its arms if a two-state solution is implemented. The words of Khalil al-Hayya to the Associated Press come as refugees are leaving Rafah, fearing Israel's next move. Israel stepped up airstrikes on Rafah overnight, saying it would evacuate civilians from the southern Gazan city and launch an all-out assault in spite of allies' warnings that this could cause mass casualties. And of course, chief among those allies is US President Joe Biden. In Gaza, Israel's military says there are still around 100 Israeli hostages being held by Hamas, as well as the remains of another 30. Israel's war cabinet has been meeting this Thursday to discuss how it can get rid of the last vestiges, it says, of Hamas. Here at France 24, this report from Leo McGuinn.
A ground assault on Rafah is now a matter of when, not if, as confirmed by the Israeli government on Wednesday.
Israel is moving ahead with our operation to target Hamas in Rafah. We will, as usual, be making every effort to move civilians out of harm's way as we have done in the past. We believe that we've destroyed at least 18 or 19 of Hamas's 24 battalions, but the 4 battalions which remain in Rafah cannot be shielded from Israel. They will be attacked.
Rafah is currently home to 1.4 million Palestinians who have fled the war. Ahead of the Israeli assault, sources suggest that they will be relocated to the city of Khan Yunis, just 3 kilometers away. According to the Defense Ministry, 40,000 tents have been bought in preparation, each with a capacity for 10 to 12 people. Satellite pictures seem to confirm as much. This image shows the same stretch of land in Khan Yunis just 2 weeks apart, now packed with hundreds of white tents. Civilian evacuations would take around a month. Many NGOs have warned against the human cost of any assault, saying it will not be possible for everyone to leave the city, resulting in a lot of civilian casualties. For those currently sheltering in Rafah, they see the city as the last safe haven left in Gaza.
There is no safe place in all of Gaza except for this area here, because it's on the border with Egypt. If the Israeli army enters here, there will be no safe place left in Rafah.
Western countries, including the United States, have urged Israel to hold back from attacking Rafah, with US President Joe Biden warning that any assault on the city would be a mistake.
Let's bring in Rob Williams, Chief Executive Officer of War Child UK. Rob, welcome back to France 24. We always appreciate your presence and your analysis. Tell us of your fears for the children of Rafah right now.
We're really worried about what will happen if Israeli forces move in. We have to remember that there is no space in Rafah. Any kind of sustained military activity is going to cause civilian casualties in much higher numbers even than we've seen in the last few months in Gaza, because this place is so crowded. 1.5 million people in a very, very, very small area. The population also is very weak. They haven't had enough food for 6 months. There's about 30% of this population which is at the highest level of poor nutrition on the 5-level scale, which we use to measure nutritional health, which means they are on the edge of starvation. So the imaginative idea that you can move this population safely from a very crowded area into another very crowded area where there isn't enough shelter and there won't be enough aid distributed without causing high levels of death just from the fact of moving very, very weak people is not credible. So the impact on civilians is going to be huge. They have a right to be there. They have a right to seek safety. And if you move them forcibly, you are breaking international law. The laws of war are really clear about Israel's obligation in this situation. They can't move civilian populations by force, and they have to ensure that civilian populations are getting enough food. But they seem to be intent on doing the thing which is illegal and not following through on their responsibilities to this population which is trapped in Gaza. And this small place in Rafah, it is the only place left where people will feel any kind of comfort or safety, because they know where they're going to go next will be less safe and less secure.
Indeed, and it's worth pointing out to people who perhaps don't realise this, but not everybody who's in Rafah, of course, is a member of Hamas. Not everybody who is in the Gaza Strip took part in the October the 7th atrocities. And those atrocities were just that. No one can begin to justify what happened. It was horrific what Hamas did. But what's happened since, of course, is this mass loss of life in the Gaza Strip. Over 34,000 killed so far, many of them women and children, which again brings me to the question, children the biggest victims of this conflict, and that's set to get worse.
It is. So 13,000 children have died. The numbers of children injured, we estimate to be around 75 to 80,000. So 5% of Gaza children are either dead or injured. Many, many more thousands are very, very weak from malnutrition. Imagine a 5-year-old child who's not getting enough food. Their condition deteriorates much faster than an adult, just because they haven't got the stocks of fat and energy that older people have in their bodies. So they are the most vulnerable people. 1 week of diarrhea for a 6-year-old is a very, very life-threatening situation, whereas for an adult, it's a bad week, but you can recover. The water that these children have been drinking for the last 6 months comes from unpurified sources and is never enough anyway. But they're drinking water which they know has a high risk of causing them severe illness, including hepatitis and cholera. So the basic part of the rules of war are you have to distinguish between a combatant and a non-combatant. And unless you do that, you have very high casualty rates, which is what we're seeing here. And these children have a right to protection. The rules of war are very clear about the need to consider the vulnerabilities of children in particular and keep them apart from the conflict. That hasn't really happened at all. And Israel's allies are telling them the truth, which is that if they try and go into Rafah with military force, it will be a humanitarian catastrophe. Their allies are telling them that. Egypt is telling them that. And just as the mood amongst our staff in Gaza was about a month ago that although Netanyahu was saying he would go into Gaza, they just thought it just wouldn't be politically possible. Now, I think what I'm hearing from our team on the ground is they really do think that there's a high chance of it happening. And so the levels of anxiety in Rafah have skyrocketed, I would say in the last week, when they suddenly realized that this might actually happen.
Rob, you mentioned your team on the ground, and obviously they're risking their lives to try to help as they can. What can they do given the shortage of everything? Do they feel it's worth the risk to keep staying, to keep trying to help Palestinian children?
Yeah, absolutely. What's remarkable is what they have been able to do. They've been able to find pockets of food here and there and access food on trucks coming through, and they've been able to distribute that to the most vulnerable families. Lots of informal distribution networks have been created and small distribution sites, even small sites where we're able to provide some kind of education. We found places in Rafah where we can do that. And one of the things that we're most upset about is if this population is forced to move very quickly, those informal and resilient ways of distributing food and aid will suddenly unravel. Again, all the work that's been done in the last few months to make sure that food can get to the most vulnerable families will be completely destroyed. And that'll all have to be rebuilt again somewhere else. And we'll see pictures of children dismantling shelters made of corrugated iron and tarpaulin and dragging them 2 or 3 kilometers up the road, desperately seeking a safe place. They're not really in a condition to do that. They're so weak at the moment.
Those that have survived are at risk, as you say. You've outlined all the reasons why. Education, of course, has gone completely out the window. This is a big question, but I need a brief answer. What is the future for Gaza's children, Rob?
The future has to be a major effort to reconstruct what's been destroyed. Infrastructure, yes, but also the networks of mental health support and education. Education can happen anywhere as long as you have teachers. So whilst this place is rebuilt, there needs to be a huge commitment to providing for children what they need, which is food, basic need, education, and psychological support. That's all possible if we get a ceasefire, but not really anywhere near possible if we don't.
Rob Williams, Chief Executive Officer of War Child UK. Thank you once again for joining us here in France 24. We appreciate your time and your analysis, and most of all, your insight. Thank you, sir, very much indeed. His team working in Gaza to help the children there who are the innocent victims of this conflict. Rob, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for watching. Do stay with us. We'll take a very short break.